The paralyzed black woman screams as cruel settlers hurl her wheelchair-bound body into the churning river waters until the rugged cowboy plunges in after her. The townspeople had whispered she was cursed, a burden who brought misfortune wherever her wheels rolled. They expected the swift current to solve their problem permanently, washing away what they saw as dead weight. But the weathered drifter saw something else entirely, sharp intelligence burning behind eyes that others dismissed, a survivor's strength that defied her broken body. What neither the woman nor her unexpected savior knew was that her small patch of riverside land held the key to exposing a conspiracy that had already claimed dozens of lives. Would this rescue become their salvation, or merely delay an inevitable reckoning that could destroy them both? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The wheels of Serafina Caldwell's battered chair creaked against the wooden planks of Millbrook's main street. Women pulled their children closer when she passed. Men turned their backs. The whispers followed her everywhere like shadows at dusk. 3 years since the fever took her legs. 3 years since the townspeople decided she was cursed. They tolerated her only because Mrs. Henderson had shown her Christian charity before the old woman died. Now, even that thin thread of protection was gone. Sarah navigated around a puddle, her calloused hands gripping the wheel rims. Colorado Territory in 1847 had little patience for the weak, even less for someone who looked like her and couldn't work the fields or serve in the saloons. Judge Cornelius Blackwood emerged from his office, his silver beard gleaming in the afternoon sun. His smile never reached his eyes. He approached with measured steps, his polished boots clicking against the boards. "Miss Caldwell, I trust you've considered my offer." Sarah straightened in her chair. Mrs. Henderson had left her the small plot by the river. Nothing much to look at, but it was hers, the first thing she'd ever owned. "I have, Judge. My answer remains no." Blackwood's smile twitched. His fingers drummed against his vest. "The property requires maintenance you cannot provide. My offer is generous." "Generous to whom?" The judge's eyes hardened. He leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This town has been patient with you, girl. Patience has limits." A horse and rider appeared at the far end of the street. The stranger sat tall in his saddle, his hat pulled low against the sun. Dust clung to his weathered coat. His horse moved with the easy gait of long travels. Blackwood straightened, his politician's mask sliding back into place. "Consider carefully, Miss Caldwell. Some opportunities don't come twice." The judge walked away as the rider dismounted near the boarding house. The stranger moved with quiet purpose, his eyes taking in everything. When his gaze found Sarah, he touched his hat brim in respectful acknowledgement. Sarah wheeled toward the general store. The proprietor's wife saw her coming and quickly flipped the sign to closed. The woman disappeared into the back room. Sarah had expected nothing different. Dr. Eleanor Hartwell's clinic stood at the end of the street. The lady doctor had arrived from Boston 6 months ago, bringing modern ideas and newfangled medicines. She treated Sarah like a person instead of a problem. "Any luck with supplies?" Dr. Hartwell asked when Sarah entered. "Store was closed." The doctor's mouth formed a thin line. She wiped her hands on a clean towel. "I can spare some flour and beans. Not much, but enough for a few days. I can pay." "I know you can. Mrs. Henderson left you well provided for." Dr. Hartwell moved to her cabinet. "That's precisely why certain people want you gone." Through the window, Sarah watched the new stranger leading his horse to the livery. He moved like a man accustomed to trouble. Something about his careful awareness reminded her of the federal marshals who'd passed through last spring. "Who is he?" Sarah asked. Dr. Hartwell glanced outside. "Calls himself Matthias Thornfield. Asked about room and board. Paid for a week in advance. Running from something? Or towards something?" The doctor handed Sarah a small sack of provisions. "Either way, he's the first person in months who didn't ask about the cursed woman in the wheelchair." That evening, Sarah sat on her small porch overlooking the river. The water ran high from mountain snowmelt, carrying branches and debris in its swift current. Mrs. Henderson had loved this view, called it peaceful. Now it felt like the edge of the world. Footsteps approached on the gravel path. 3 men emerged from the twilight shadows. She recognized Blackwood's foreman and 2 ranch hands. Their faces were hard in the lamplight. "Evening, miss." The foreman's voice carried false courtesy. "Judge sent us to help you reconsider his offer." "I don't need help thinking. Maybe you need help with other things." The foreman stepped closer. "Like understanding your place in this community." A voice cut through the darkness. "Lady said she doesn't need help." Matthias Thornfield stepped into the light circle. His hand rested casually near his gun belt. The 3 men turned, suddenly uncertain. "This ain't your concern, stranger." "Making it my concern." Thornfield's voice carried quiet authority. "You boys best move along." The foreman's face reddened. "You don't know what you're messing with." "Know enough." The standoff stretched like a held breath. Finally, the foreman spat into the dirt. "This isn't finished." The 3 men melted back into the darkness. Thornfield remained until their footsteps faded completely. "Thank you," Sarah said. He touched his hat brim again. "Ma'am." He turned to leave. "Why?" Thornfield paused. "Some things are right. Some things aren't. Usually pretty clear which is which." After he left, Sarah sat alone with the river's constant murmur. She'd seen something in the stranger's eyes. Recognition, maybe, like he knew what it meant to be unwanted. Inside her cabin, she pulled out the wooden box Mrs. Henderson had left her. Land papers, a small bag of coins, and something else. A letter addressed to her in the old woman's careful script. The envelope was sealed. Mrs. Henderson had made her promise to open it only if she faced real danger. The men tonight had been a warning, not a threat. Not yet. But Sarah could feel something building in Millbrook like storm clouds on the horizon. Judge Blackwood wanted her land badly enough to send men in the night. The question was why. She placed the letter back in the box. Whatever secrets it held would have to wait. For now, she had an unexpected ally and a decision to make. Stay and fight, or accept that some battles couldn't be won from a wheelchair. The river whispered against its banks, carrying its secrets toward morning. Dawn broke gray and cold over Millbrook. Sarah woke to the sound of boots on her porch. Heavy steps, multiple pairs. She rolled from bed into her wheelchair with practiced efficiency. Through the window she counted 6 men. Blackwood's foreman led them. Their faces were set with grim purpose. The door burst open without ceremony. Rough hands grabbed her chair, lifting it despite her protests. The foreman's breath stank of whiskey and tobacco. Judge's patience ran out. They carried her chair down the path toward town. Sarah gripped the armrests, her mind racing. The river ran high and fast from recent rains. Its roar grew louder as they approached the bank. Townspeople gathered to watch. Women clutched their shawls tighter. Men nodded approval. Children pointed and whispered. No one stepped forward to help. "This is murder," Sarah said. "This is justice." The foreman set her chair at the water's edge. "You should have taken the judge's offer." Matthias Thornfield appeared at the crowd's edge. His hand moved toward his gun, but 2 men stepped behind him. They pressed rifle barrels against his back. "Easy, stranger. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Thornfield's jaw tightened. His eyes met Sarah's across the distance. She saw calculation there. Planning. The look of a man who'd faced impossible odds before. The foreman grabbed Sarah's chair. "Time to go." The first shove sent her wheels spinning toward the bank. Sarah twisted in her seat, fighting for balance. The crowd pressed closer, their faces blurred with excitement and fear. "Stop this!" Dr. Hartwell pushed through the crowd. "She's done nothing wrong." "She's cursed!" someone shouted. "Brought nothing but trouble." The second shove carried her to the very edge. Water sprayed up from the rocks below. The current moved like a living thing, hungry and relentless. Sarah looked back at the faces watching her die. These people who'd shared the same streets, breathed the same air. Their eyes held no mercy, only relief that their problem would soon disappear. The final push sent her chair tumbling into the churning water. Cold hit her like a physical blow. The river swallowed her scream, filling her mouth with muddy water. Her heavy skirts dragged her down. The chair's weight pulled her deeper. Above the surface, Matthias Thornfield broke free from his captors. In the space of a heartbeat, he made his choice. The same choice he'd failed to make 3 years ago in Kansas, when Sheriff Hawkins had beaten that innocent farmer to death while Thornfield watched from the shadows, when his badge and his future mattered more than doing what was right. He'd lost his badge anyway. Hawkins had made sure of that when Thornfield finally found his courage too late. The farmer was already dead. The sheriff's lies already accepted. Truth became treason in a town built on corruption. Thornfield had ridden away that night with blood on his conscience. 3 years of drifting hadn't washed it clean. 3 years of telling himself the next time would be different. This was the next time. He dove. The river's current seized him immediately. The spring runoff carried debris and fallen trees, turning the water into a battlefield. Thornfield had never been a strong swimmer. The uniform had kept him on dry land during his lawman days. But Sarah was drowning 15 feet ahead of him. He kicked hard against the current, his boots and gun belt dragging him down. His lungs burned from the cold water. Branches scraped his face and hands as the river carried them both downstream. Sarah's chair had separated from her body, sinking like a stone. She struggled against her heavy dress, her useless legs anchoring her beneath the surface. Panic flickered in her eyes when she saw him coming. Thornfield reached her just as they swept toward a cluster of jagged rocks. He wrapped one arm around her waist, using his other hand to grab for anything solid. His fingers found a low-hanging willow branch just as the current tried to smash them against the stones. The branch bent, but held. Thornfield's shoulder screamed in protest as their combined weight tested the wood. Sarah coughed up river water, her body shaking from shock and cold. "Hold on," he gasped. The branch cracked. They had seconds before it snapped completely. Thornfield swung them toward the bank, using momentum from the current. His boots found purchase on the muddy slope. He hauled them both onto solid ground just as the willow gave way. They lay gasping on the riverbank. Sarah's lips had turned blue from the cold. Her dark skin looked ashen in the gray morning light, but her eyes burned with fierce intelligence, studying his face like she was memorizing every detail. "Why?" she whispered. Thornfield sat up slowly, water streaming from his coat. "Had a chance to do right once before. Didn't take it." Above them on the road, the crowd stood frozen in shock. They'd expected to watch a drowning, not a rescue. The foreman's face had gone pale. Dr. Hartwell was already running down the slope with her medical bag. Judge Blackwood appeared at the road's edge. His silver beard couldn't hide the fury twisting his features. The plan had gone wrong. Witnesses had seen too much. Questions would be asked. "Get them to my clinic," Dr. Hartwell ordered as she reached them. Thornfield lifted Sarah carefully, surprised by how light she felt. Her body was small, but her presence filled more space than most men twice her size. As they climbed toward the road, Sarah's hand gripped his arm. Her voice was barely audible. "They wanted me dead. This wasn't about cruelty." "I know. My land. I figured." Her grip tightened. "Then you know they'll try again." Thornfield looked back at Judge Blackwood's face, at the foreman's worried expression, at the townspeople who'd cheered for murder and now stood silent with shame. Let them try. Dr. Hartwell's clinic smelled of carbolic acid and dried herbs. Sarah lay on the examination table, her waterlogged dress replaced with a clean blanket. The doctor's hands moved with professional efficiency, checking pulse and breathing. "Body temperature is stabilizing," Dr. Hartwell murmured. "But I need to examine your legs for circulation damage from the cold water." The doctor's fingers pressed against Sarah's ankle, then her calf. Her expression changed. "Can you feel this?" Sarah's breath caught. A tingling sensation shot up her leg like lightning. For 3 years, her lower body had been dead weight. Now something sparked in the darkness. "I felt something." Dr. Hartwell's eyes widened. She pressed harder against different points on Sarah's leg. Each touch sent waves of sensation through nerve pathways that had been silent since the fever. "The cold shock therapy," the doctor whispered, "combined with the trauma." Sometimes extreme temperature changes can restore damaged neural connections. Sarah stared at her legs beneath the blanket, the same legs that had failed her, the same body the townspeople had thrown away like garbage. How much feeling? Too early to know, but there's definitely nerve response. Dr. Hartwell covered her legs carefully. This must stay between us for now. If Blackwood learns you're recovering, he'll find another way to eliminate you. Thornfield sat in the corner, his clothes still damp from the river. He'd been quiet since carrying her inside, but his eyes missed nothing. She's right, he said. They'll try again. Different method next time. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The attempted drowning hadn't been random cruelty. It was calculated murder disguised as frontier justice. Someone wanted her land badly enough to kill for it. Tell me about Mrs. Henderson's property, Dr. Hartwell said. Small plot by the river, maybe 3 acres. She said it was worthless except for the view. Worthless to who? Sarah closed her eyes, drawing on the memory skills that had kept her alive for 3 years. When you couldn't fight or run, you learned to remember everything. Every conversation, every detail, every slight that revealed someone's true intentions. She'd been 7 years old when the traveling teacher had stopped in her village. The woman had called her gift remarkable, a mind that stored information like books on a shelf, perfectly organized and instantly accessible. The fever that took her legs had left her memory sharper than ever. 3 years of watching and listening from her wheelchair had taught her to read people like scripture. Mrs. Henderson mentioned water rights once, Sarah said slowly. Said the property came with access to the underground spring that feeds the river. Water rights are valuable in dry country, Thornfield observed, but we've had plenty of rain this year. Dr. Hartwell frowned. The river's running higher than normal. Sarah's photographic memory pulled up another detail. She also said something about the water tasting different in town lately. Metallic. Made her stomach hurt. The doctor's face went pale. I've treated a dozen cases of stomach ailments this month, all from families who live near the main well. But not from families who use river water? No, only the townspeople who depend on the community well. The pieces clicked into place in Sarah's mind like a lock opening. He's poisoning the well water. Thornfield leaned forward. Who? Blackwood. Or someone working for him. Sarah's voice grew stronger as the theory crystallized. Make people sick enough to sell their property cheap, buy up the land through proxies, control the water supply. That's a serious accusation, Dr. Hartwell said. Serious enough to kill for. Sarah tested moving her toes under the blanket. A spark of sensation rewarded her effort. My property has clean water. If people discovered the well was contaminated, they'd need an alternative source. You'd become wealthy overnight, Thornfield realized. Or dead, whichever served Blackwood's interest better. Dr. Hartwell began pacing. If the well is truly contaminated, we need proof. Chemical analysis, documentation. We need more than that. Thornfield stood and moved to the window. We need to know how deep this goes. How many people are involved? Who's really behind it? Sarah attempted to flex her ankle. The movement was weak, but definite. Her body was healing itself through some miracle of shock and trauma. The very act meant to kill her was giving her back her strength. There's something else, she said quietly. Mrs. Henderson left me a sealed letter. Said to open it only if I faced real danger. I'd say attempted murder qualifies, Dr. Hartwell observed. Tonight, when it's safe. Sarah looked at Thornfield. You're taking a big risk helping me. Why? His jaw tightened. Had a badge once in Kansas. Sheriff named Hawkins was taking bribes, beating innocent people. I knew what he was doing, but kept quiet. Told myself it wasn't my business. The memory played across his face like shadows. One night, Hawkins killed a farmer over a land dispute. Beat him to death while I watched from across the street. I could have stopped it. Should have stopped it. What happened? Nothing. Hawkins claimed self-defense. The town believed him. When I finally tried to speak up, He had me run out of town, stripped my badge, made sure no other jurisdiction would hire me. Sarah understood now. The careful way he watched for trouble, the quiet authority in his voice, the instinct to protect the helpless. You've been running ever since. Until now. Dr. Hartwell checked the window for watchers. The street outside remained empty, but that wouldn't last. News traveled fast in a small town. They'll be planning their next move, she said. Sarah tested her leg muscles again, stronger this time. The sensation was returning gradually, like sunrise creeping across a dark landscape. So are we. That night, when the town slept and the clinic lay in darkness, Sarah would open Mrs. Henderson's letter. Whatever secrets the old woman had hidden, whatever knowledge she'd protected, it was time for truth to surface. The river had tried to take her life. Instead, it had given her back her body and delivered an unlikely ally. Now she had advantages her enemies didn't know about: a recovering body, a perfect memory, and a man who'd finally found his courage. The game was just beginning. Midnight brought silence to Millbrook's empty streets. Sarah sat in her wheelchair beside Dr. Hartwell's examination table, Mrs. Henderson's letter trembling in her hands. The wax seal bore the old woman's initials pressed deep into red wax. She broke it open. The letter contained 3 pages of careful script and a hand-drawn map. Mrs. Henderson's words revealed years of secret observation and growing fear. My dear Sarah, the letter began, if you are reading this, then Judge Blackwood has finally made his move. I have suspected for months that he is poisoning our community well with mercury runoff from an illegal mining operation upstream. The symptoms match what I witnessed during the California gold rush. Sarah's photographic memory absorbed every detail. The map showed mining claims along the river's upper reaches, claims registered under false names but traced back to Blackwood through a web of shell companies. He has been making people sick deliberately, the letter continued, then offering to buy their property at reduced prices. I estimate he already controls 60% of the water rights in the county through these methods. Dr. Hartwell read over Sarah's shoulder. Mercury poisoning would explain the stomach ailments, the headaches, the strange rashes I've been treating. There's more. Sarah turned to the final page. She documented everything: dates, symptoms, property transfers. She was building a case against him. The letter's conclusion sent chills down Sarah's spine. I fear Blackwood suspects my knowledge. If anything happens to me, take this evidence to the territorial marshal in Denver. Trust no local authorities. The corruption runs deeper than you know. Mrs. Henderson had died of sudden illness 2 weeks after writing the letter. She was murdered, Sarah whispered. Thornfield appeared at the clinic's back door. He'd been watching the streets for signs of trouble. His face was grim. 3 men posted around the building. They're not trying to hide it. Blackwood wants us to know we're trapped, Dr. Hartwell said. Sarah folded the letter carefully. Then we give him what he expects to see. For the next hour, she explained her plan. It required perfect timing and considerable risk. But it also had one crucial advantage. Blackwood believed she was still paralyzed and helpless. Over the following days, Sarah played her role flawlessly. She remained in her wheelchair, accepting visitors who came to gawk at the woman who'd survived drowning. Their conversations revealed more than they intended. Heard the widow Morrison's selling her place, one woman mentioned. Poor thing's been sick for weeks. The Peterson boys got that strange rash again, added another. Doctor says it might be catching. Each snippet of information confirmed the pattern. Families near the community well were falling ill. Those who used river water or private springs remained healthy. Dr. Hartwell conducted her own investigation. She tested water samples from the community well, using chemical reagents from her medical supplies. The results confirmed mercury contamination at dangerous levels. Enough to cause chronic illness, she reported quietly. Not enough to kill quickly, but over months or years it would be fatal. Meanwhile, Thornfield gathered intelligence on Blackwood's operation. His law enforcement background served him well as he traced property records and observed the judge's associates. He's got men working the Upper Creek sites at night, Thornfield reported, moving equipment in darkness, dumping waste directly into the water supply. During his reconnaissance, Thornfield discovered something else. Blackwood was planning to frame him for a more serious crime to eliminate the threat permanently. "Found stolen cattle on property I've never seen before," he told Sarah and Dr. Hartwell. "Cattle with brands from 3 different ranches. Someone's setting up charges of rustling. How long before they arrest you?" "Soon. Maybe tomorrow." That night, Dr. Hartwell helped Sarah with secret physical therapy in the clinic's back room. Her leg strength was returning gradually but steadily. She could stand for short periods and take tentative steps while holding on to furniture. "The nerve regeneration is remarkable," Dr. Hartwell observed. "Another week and you might walk unassisted." "We may not have a week." Sarah practiced moving quietly across the room. Her legs shook with effort. But they responded to her will. 3 years of paralysis were slowly retreating before determination and miracle healing. The next morning brought Sheriff Daniels and 2 deputies to the clinic. They carried arrest warrants and hard expressions. "Matthias Thornfield, you're under arrest for cattle theft and conspiracy." Thornfield didn't resist. He met Sarah's eyes briefly before they led him away. The message was clear. Everything now depended on her. Alone except for Dr. Hartwell's support, Sarah made her final preparations. She had documented evidence of the poisoning scheme. She had proof of Blackwood's fraudulent land acquisitions. She had witness testimony from dozens of poisoning victims. What she didn't have was a way to present the evidence without being killed first. That afternoon, Judge Blackwood visited the clinic personally. He dismissed Dr. Hartwell with cold authority and wheeled Sarah's chair to the window overlooking the main street. "Your friend will hang for rustling," he said conversationally. "Territorial law is quite clear on cattle theft." Sarah remained silent. "I'm prepared to offer you one final opportunity," Blackwood continued. "Sign over your property rights, and I'll arrange for the charges against Thornfield to be reduced. He'll serve time in prison instead of meeting the gallows. And if I refuse? Then you'll watch him die tomorrow morning, after which you'll suffer another unfortunate accident. Perhaps a fire this time." Sarah looked at the papers he'd placed in her lap. Legal documents transferring her land rights to one of his shell companies for a token sum. "I need time to consider. You have until sunrise. The execution is scheduled for dawn." After Blackwood left, Sarah sat alone in her wheelchair, weighing impossible choices. Save Thornfield's life by surrendering everything, or watch him die while trying to expose the truth. But Blackwood had made one crucial mistake. He still believed she was helpless. Tonight would prove him wrong. The courthouse filled before dawn. Word of the rustling trial had spread through Millbrook like wildfire. Townspeople crowded the benches, eager for frontier justice. They whispered about the stranger who'd interfered with their cleansing of the cursed woman. Sarah sat in her wheelchair near the front, Dr. Hartwell beside her. The leather satchel in her lap contained Mrs. Henderson's evidence and Dr. Hartwell's water contamination tests. Everything they needed to expose Blackwood's conspiracy, if she lived long enough to present it. Judge Blackwood entered wearing his finest robes. His silver beard was perfectly groomed for the occasion. He carried himself like a man anticipating victory. Thornfield stood at the defendant's table in shackles. His face was bruised from a night in Blackwood's jail, but his eyes remained steady. When he spotted Sarah, he gave an almost imperceptible nod. The trial proceeded with theatrical efficiency. Sheriff Daniels testified about finding stolen cattle on property where Thornfield had been seen. The ranchers identified their missing livestock. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Blackwood's gavel struck the bench with authority. "The defendant will rise for sentencing." "Your Honor," Dr. Hartwell stood suddenly. "I have evidence relevant to this case." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "This court recognizes no testimony from you, Doctor. Sit down. The evidence concerns a larger conspiracy involving cattle theft, land fraud, and mass poisoning of this community's water supply." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Blackwood's face flushed red above his beard. "You will be silent or face contempt charges." Dr. Hartwell remained standing. "Judge Cornelius Blackwood has been systematically poisoning Millbrook's water supply with mercury runoff from illegal mining operations. The goal was to make residents sick enough to sell their property at reduced prices." Remove this woman from my courthouse. Sheriff Daniels moved toward Dr. Hartwell, but Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. She's telling the truth. Every head turned toward the wheelchair-bound woman they'd tried to drown 3 days earlier. Sarah reached into her satchel and withdrew Mrs. Henderson's letter. I have documentation of Judge Blackwood's crimes, signed testimony from the late Mrs. Henderson, who was murdered to prevent her from exposing this conspiracy. Blackwood slammed his gavel repeatedly. You have no standing in this court. You are not a legal citizen of this territory. Then let me establish my standing. Sarah gripped the arms of her wheelchair and slowly pushed herself upright. Her legs trembled with effort, but they held her weight. Shocked whispers filled the courtroom as she took her first step away from the chair. Then another. Then another. She walked to the witness stand on unsteady but determined legs. The same legs Blackwood's men had assumed would drag her to the bottom of the river. The attempted murder 3 days ago was not random cruelty, Sarah announced to the stunned courtroom. It was calculated elimination of a witness who threatened to expose mass poisoning for profit. Blackwood recovered his composure quickly. This is all lies and theater. The woman is clearly delusional from her ordeal. Then explain this. Dr. Hartwell held up a glass vial containing cloudy water. Mercury contamination from your community well. Enough to cause chronic illness in every family that depends on municipal water. And this. Sarah displayed Mrs. Henderson's map. Documentation of illegal mining claims registered under false names but controlled by shell companies traced directly to Judge Blackwood. The courtroom erupted in angry voices. Families who'd been suffering mysterious illnesses for months suddenly understood the cause. Property owners who'd sold their land cheap realized they'd been swindled. This is absurd, Blackwood shouted over the noise. I am a respected member of this community. These accusations are the desperate lies of criminals facing justice. Then explain why families using river water remain healthy while those drinking from the community well are dying slowly of mercury poisoning, Dr. Hartwell challenged. Sarah opened Mrs. Henderson's letter and began reading in a clear, carrying voice. My dear Sarah, if you are reading this, then Judge Blackwood has finally made his move. I have suspected for months that he is poisoning our community well. She continued reading the detailed accusations, the documented evidence, the careful observations that had cost Mrs. Henderson her life. Her photographic memory allowed her to recite additional details that weren't written down, but had been shared in private conversations. The crowd's mood shifted from skepticism to horror to rage. These people had been poisoned deliberately. Their children had been made sick for profit. Their neighbors had died to protect one man's greed. Where's your proof? Blackwood demanded, but his confident mask was slipping. Here. Sarah produced water test results. Scientific analysis showing mercury levels 20 times higher than safe consumption standards. Here. Dr. Hartwell displayed medical records. Treatment logs showing illness patterns that match mercury poisoning symptoms exactly. And here. Sarah held up property transfer documents Mrs. Henderson had copied secretly. Fraudulent land sales using shell companies to hide the true buyer's identity. The evidence mounted relentlessly. Every accusation supported by documentation. Every claim backed by scientific proof. Sarah's perfect memory provided details that painted a picture of systematic murder for profit. Thornfield watched from the defendant's table as public opinion turned decisively. The man who'd been scheduled to hang for cattle rustling was forgotten, as the community confronted their real enemy. You have no authority, Blackwood protested desperately. This is my court. I decide what evidence is admissible. Not anymore. A new voice spoke from the courtroom's rear entrance. Territorial Marshal William Crawford stood in the doorway wearing federal badges and carrying official warrants. Dr. Hartwell had sent word to Denver through trusted contacts requesting federal intervention. Judge Cornelius Blackwood, you are under arrest for violation of territorial mining laws, conspiracy to commit murder, and mass poisoning of a civilian population. The federal marshal's men moved through the courtroom with professional efficiency. Blackwood's local allies made no effort to resist. The evidence was overwhelming. The federal authority absolute. As they led Blackwood away in chains, he turned back toward Sarah with undisguised hatred. This isn't over. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Yes, it is. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the wooden platform overlooking the new water treatment facility. Her legs carried her with confident strength now, the miracle of her recovery complete. The spring that fed her inherited property now supplied clean water to every home in Millbrook through a network of pipes and pumps. The federal court in Denver had worked with ruthless efficiency. Judge Blackwood received 20 years in territorial prison for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. His mining operation was shut down, the mercury contamination cleaned up at federal expense. Every fraudulent property transfer was reversed, returning stolen land to its rightful owners. Marshall Crawford had recommended Sarah for a territorial commendation, the first ever awarded to a black woman in Colorado Territory. She kept the certificate in Mrs. Henderson's old wooden box alongside the letter that had saved them all. Dr. Hartwell's expanded clinic occupied the ground floor of a new building on Main Street. Her reputation for treating the poisoning victims had brought patients from 3 counties. She'd also begun training local women in basic medical care, sharing knowledge that had once been restricted to men with formal education. The clinic's sign bore 2 names now, Dr. Eleanor Hartwell and Sarah Caldwell, community health advocate. Sarah's perfect memory had proved invaluable in tracking symptoms, managing treatment records, and identifying patterns that escaped formal medical training. Thornfield walked up the path wearing his new sheriff's badge. The territorial governor had appointed him to clean up Millbrook's law enforcement after Sheriff Daniels was arrested as Blackwood's accomplice. His first act had been hiring 2 deputies without regard to their skin color or background. "Town council meeting in an hour," he said. Sarah nodded. She'd been elected to the council in a special election 3 months ago. The same townspeople who'd cheered her attempted drowning now sought her opinion on everything from road repairs to school funding. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. Fear and prejudice died slowly, even when faced with overwhelming evidence of their foolishness. But economic necessity had forced change faster than moral awakening might have managed alone. Sarah's water treatment facility employed 15 people. Her partnership with Dr. Hartwell brought federal medical contracts to the community. The clean water and improved health care attracted new families, new businesses, new opportunities for growth. Money spoke louder than conscience, but the result was the same. Millbrook had become a place where worth was measured by contribution rather than appearance. The evening council meeting addressed the proposal for a new school building. Sarah had pushed for the project since joining the council. Education meant opportunity. Opportunity meant escape from the cycles of ignorance that bred hatred. "We need a building that serves all children," she told the assembled councilmen. "Not separate facilities based on race or family background." Councilman Peters, who'd once watched silently as men dragged her to the river, now nodded agreement. "Miss Caldwell is right. We can't afford division anymore." The vote was unanimous. Construction would begin in the spring. After the meeting, Sarah walked home through streets she'd once navigated in fear. Children called out greetings instead of throwing stones. Women smiled and asked about her health instead of crossing to the opposite sidewalk. The changes went deeper than mere politeness. The community had learned what happened when they allowed fear to override humanity. They'd discovered that their supposed curse had been their salvation. Thornfield joined her for the evening walk that had become their routine. Neither spoke of romance, though the possibility hung unaddressed between them. Their partnership was built on shared purpose rather than passion. Perhaps that foundation would support something more eventually. Perhaps not. Either outcome would be acceptable. "Federal Marshal sent word about Blackwood," Thornfield said as they reached Sarah's property. "What news?" "Died in prison, heart failure." Sarah felt no satisfaction at the news. Justice had been served through legal channels. Blackwood's death changed nothing for better or worse. Her house sat where Mrs. Henderson's cabin once stood, but larger and sturdier. The original structure had burned down under mysterious circumstances 2 weeks after Blackwood's arrest. Sarah suspected his remaining allies had been responsible, but no evidence surfaced to prove it. The new house was built from stone and good timber. It would last generations. The large front room served as her office for managing the water facility and community health programs. The second floor provided private living space and a guest room for Dr. Hartwell's frequent visits. But the back porch remained unchanged from Mrs. Henderson's time, the same view of the river that had nearly claimed her life, the same sound of water flowing steadily toward distant horizons. Sarah stood at the porch railing as twilight painted the sky purple and gold. The river ran clear now, free from mercury contamination. Children played safely along its banks. Families brought picnic baskets to enjoy Sunday afternoons by the water. The very place where townspeople had gathered to watch her drown had become the heart of community recreation. Poetic justice in its truest form. A letter arrived the next morning from the territorial capital. The governor was establishing a new position, Territorial Advocate for Community Health, with authority to investigate water quality and medical care throughout Colorado Territory. The appointment came with federal backing and substantial funding. Sarah Caldwell was the governor's first choice for the position. She accepted immediately. Within a year, she would expand the program to 12 communities across the territory. Her perfect memory and analytical skills would save thousands of lives by identifying contamination sources and fraud schemes before they could cause widespread harm. The wheelchair that had once defined her limitations now sat in her parlor as a reminder, not of weakness, but of the strength that grew from surviving attempts at destruction. The river that had been meant to carry away an unwanted burden had instead delivered transformation. For Sarah, for Thornfield, for an entire community that learned to see beyond surface judgments to the worth that lay beneath. Water still flowed past her porch each evening, carrying new possibilities toward tomorrow.